My name is Claire Bennett, and until recently I believed kindness was something people appreciated. I never imagined it could become an invitation for someone to take advantage of me. It all started with something as insignificant as a laundry card. After discovering that my roommate had been secretly using it for weeks, I quietly decided not to add any more money to the balance. I didn't confront her. I didn't make a scene. I simply waited to see what would happen when the card stopped working. The very next afternoon, my roommate, Brooke Dawson, stormed into our dorm room carrying a wrinkled receipt. Without even saying hello, she slapped it onto my desk and folded her arms. "Claire, why didn't you reload your laundry card? My washing machine stopped halfway through because it ran out of credit. I had to put $10 on it myself. Since we're roommates, I won't even ask you to pay extra for the trip to the machine. Just send me the $10 back." For a moment I honestly thought she was joking. One wash cost $5. During the previous 2 months she had borrowed my card so many times that I had lost count. Then I remembered I actually had counted. She had used it 30 times or more. She already owed me around $150 just for laundry, yet somehow she had the nerve to demand $10 from me. I smiled calmly and looked straight at her. "I'll gladly return your $10, I said. "Right after you pay back the $150 you owe me for every load you've already done." Her expression froze. She didn't apologize or argue. Instead, she grabbed the receipt, spun around, and walked out without another word. Less than an hour later I received an email asking me to visit the Dean of Student Affairs. I already knew why. When I entered Dean Harper's office, he greeted me with a patient smile that felt completely fake. He folded his hands across the desk and started giving me a lecture about compassion, unity, and supporting classmates who came from disadvantaged backgrounds. Brooke, he explained, was the university's scholarship ambassador. She represented perseverance and opportunity. The school often used her story during fundraising events and public ceremonies. According to him, asking her to repay borrowed money showed a lack of generosity. Then his tone became colder. He warned me that creating unnecessary conflict could damage the university's reputation. If things became public, it might affect leadership positions, recommendations, and perhaps even delay my graduation. I walked out of his office feeling numb. Somehow the person stealing from me had become the victim, while I was treated like the problem. Brooke apparently interpreted the dean's support as permission to become even bolder. That evening she loudly announced to everyone in the dormitory that I came from a wealthy family and should be sharing my money instead of counting every dollar. She laughed with several girls gathered in the hallway. "Claire has more money than she'll ever spend," she said. "Why shouldn't she help someone who actually needs it? If she's upset, let her complain. The university values me, not her." I heard every word from inside my room. Instead of getting angry, I simply laughed to myself. If they honestly believed I would stay silent forever, they were making a serious mistake. Later that night Brooke returned with watery eyes and an innocent expression that deserved an acting award. She lowered her head dramatically while our roommates watched from across the room. "Claire," she whispered, "I ran all the way across campus with wet hair just to refill your laundry card after it stopped working. I wasn't thinking about myself. I was trying to help you. Even if you don't appreciate it, how can you be so obsessed with money?" The other girls immediately looked at me as though I had committed some terrible crime. One of them asked softly, "Is it true? You won't even give her back $10? I leaned against my chair without raising my voice. "My card was empty because Brooke used every credit on it," I answered. Brooke quickly interrupted. "What are you talking about? You use it too. Besides, I've borrowed it before and you never complained." "That's because every single time you promised to repay me," I replied. "You always said you'd send the money tomorrow. Tomorrow never came." My mind drifted back to the beginning of the semester. During our second week living together, Brooke had found me folding laundry in the shared room downstairs. She smiled sweetly and explained that she had accidentally forgotten to reload her own card. "Can I borrow yours just this once?" she had asked. "I'll transfer the money tomorrow." It sounded reasonable, so I handed it over without hesitation. The next day she said nothing about repayment. I assumed she had simply forgotten. Then she borrowed it again. And again. Soon asking politely turned into expecting automatic access. Sometimes she didn't even ask anymore. She would simply stretch out her hand and say, "Give me your card. I need to wash clothes." The first time I reminded her about paying me back, she laughed as though I had made an embarrassing joke. "You still have plenty of credit," she said. "It's not real cash sitting in your wallet. Why are you keeping score?" The laundry card wasn't the only thing she treated as communal property. Whenever I ordered coffee, she wanted one too. Whenever I printed research papers, she added her assignments to my order. If I stopped by the campus cafe, she'd text asking for lunch. Every purchase came with the same promise. "I'll send you the money later." Later never arrived. I knew Brooke's family struggled financially. She had younger siblings back home and constantly talked about how difficult life had been growing up. Because of that, I ignored dozens of unpaid expenses. I convinced myself she simply needed help. Looking back, I realized my generosity had only taught her that I would never say no. Eventually I stopped reloading the laundry cart altogether. I hoped the empty balance would quietly send the message that our arrangement was over. Instead, she paid $10 herself and somehow convinced herself that I now owed her money. When I remained silent, her performance began to crack. "Claire," she said impatiently, "you're making this into something much bigger than it is." I unlocked my phone and opened a spreadsheet I had started weeks earlier after realizing how often she borrowed things. Every transaction was listed with dates, amounts, and screenshots. I slowly turned the screen toward everyone in the room. 32 laundry loads, I said calmly. $160. 12 lunches. 7 printing orders. 9 coffees. Together that's $460. Remove the $10 you added yesterday and you still owe me $450. The room fell completely silent. Brooke stared at the numbers without saying anything. Then, just as I expected, tears filled her eyes again. "I understand now," she whispered dramatically. "You think you're better than me because your family has money." I didn't answer. For the first time since we had become roommates, I realized this argument had never been about money. It was about entitlement. And something told me the worst part of the story hadn't even begun. The following afternoon I received another message from Dean Harper asking me to return to his office. The timing made me smile because I knew Brooke had already gone running to him again. When I stepped inside, he didn't even invite me to sit down. Instead, he folded his arms and looked disappointed before I had spoken a single word. "Claire," he sighed, "you're the student council president. People look up to you. Leaders are supposed to unite students, not create unnecessary disputes." I already knew exactly where this conversation was headed, so I decided to let him explain himself. "I'm not sure what dispute you're referring to," I answered. "Is this about Brooke borrowing hundreds of dollars from me and refusing to repay it?" His face remained perfectly calm. "Brooke is one of our scholarship representatives," he replied. "She has overcome enormous hardship. Students like you should support students like her. Surely a few $100s isn't important to someone from your background." There it was again. Because my parents had worked hard and built a comfortable life, everyone assumed my money somehow belonged to anyone who asked for it. I took a slow breath before responding. My parents earned everything they have. That doesn't make me responsible for financing another student's lifestyle. She didn't ask for help anymore. She simply started taking whatever she wanted. The dean's expression hardened. "Be careful, Claire. Next Monday, several city officials will visit campus. Brooke has been selected to represent the university. If her emotional state is affected because of this conflict, it could damage the school's reputation. I would hate for your graduation process to become complicated. His meaning was unmistakable. He was threatening my future simply because I had asked someone to repay money she had borrowed. I stared at him for several seconds before quietly thanking him for his advice and leaving his office. By the time I returned to the dormitory, I had stopped feeling shocked. Instead, I felt strangely calm. If people in authority believed they could pressure me into silence, then they clearly didn't know me very well. When I opened our room door, Brooke was walking out of the bathroom with damp hair. In her hand was my laundry card. She tossed it onto my desk as casually as if it belonged to her. "It's empty again," she said. "Don't forget to add more money before tomorrow." I looked at the card, then at her face. After several seconds I smiled. She frowned immediately. "Why are you smiling?" she asked suspiciously. Then her eyes brightened with confidence. "Oh, I know. The dean talked to you, didn't he? Good. I appreciate that you finally came to your senses. You don't even have to apologize. I forgive you." I almost laughed. She honestly believed she was doing me a favor by forgiving me for refusing to let her steal from me. Without answering, I reached for the hairdryer sitting on top of my cabinet just as she stretched out her hand to grab it. I picked it up first, unlocked my storage locker, and placed both the hairdryer and the laundry card inside before locking the door again. Brooke blinked in confusion. "What are you doing?" "From now on," I replied calmly, "everything that belongs to me stays locked away. If you touch any of my property again without permission, I'll report it as theft." Her confident smile disappeared for the first time since we'd met. She looked as though she wanted to argue, but I simply put on my headphones and ignored her completely. That afternoon I skipped the campus cafe, finished a paper for one of my classes, and eventually fell asleep. Around 3 o'clock my phone vibrated with a payment notification. At first I barely looked at it, but then I read the amount twice. $360 had just been charged to my prepaid VIP membership at my favorite nail salon near campus. I sat upright in bed immediately. I hadn't visited the salon in over a week. Someone else had used my account. I called the salon. The receptionist apologized repeatedly after checking the records. She admitted that one of the employees had recognized my membership number but hadn't verified the customer's identity before processing the payment. They promised to investigate and even offered me a discount on my next appointment. I thanked her politely before hanging up. Deep down I already knew exactly who had done it. About 20 minutes later Brooke returned with 2 girls from another dorm. They were laughing loudly, completely unaware that I was awake behind my closed bed curtains. Brooke stretched out both hands proudly beneath the ceiling light. Her nails sparkled with an expensive ombre design covered in tiny crystals. "Look at these," she said proudly. "I picked this style because it'll look elegant when I meet the mayor during Monday's ceremony." One of the girls gasped. "They're gorgeous. They must have cost a fortune." Brooke admired them with a satisfied grin. $360, she answered. "Worth every penny." The other girl lowered her voice. "What if Claire realizes you used her salon membership?" Brooke burst into laughter. "She's rich. $300 means nothing to her. Besides, she won't dare cause problems. The dean is on my side. If she complains, she'll be the one getting punished." "Really?" I asked quietly as I pulled my curtain aside. All 3 of them jumped in surprise. Brooke's friends immediately stepped backward. I held up my phone, where the salon transaction was still displayed on the screen. My thumb hovered above the emergency call button. "I warned you," I said evenly. "The next time you used my property without permission, I would call the police." Her friends rushed toward the door without saying another word, leaving Brooke standing alone in the middle of the room. She crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. "You're seriously overreacting over $360, she asked. I opened my payment app and held out the screen. "If it's such a small amount, repay me now." Instead of reaching for her phone, she smiled smugly. "Those nails aren't just for me. I'm representing the university. I needed to look professional for the city officials. Think of it as your contribution to the school's image. Maybe if you're cooperative, I'll even tell the dean you deserve another chance." Every sentence made her sound more unbelievable. She genuinely believed my money existed to improve her reputation. I moved the payment screen closer to her face. $360, I repeated. "Pay me." For the first time, uncertainty flashed across her face. "Didn't you listen to the dean?" she asked nervously. "I'm a scholarship student." I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed the emergency call button. The phone began ringing. Brooke's confidence shattered instantly. She lunged toward me, grabbed my wrist, and ended the call before anyone answered. "Have you lost your mind?" she shouted. Seconds later, tears poured down her face as though someone had flipped a switch. She immediately dialed Dean Harper instead. "Please come quickly," she cried dramatically. "Claire is trying to have me arrested." A moment later, she activated the speakerphone. The dean's furious voice filled the room. "Claire, how many times do I have to tell you to stop causing trouble? Leave Brooke alone. If this continues, forget your leadership position. Forget graduating." The line disconnected. Brooke slowly lowered the phone and smiled with complete satisfaction. "See," she whispered. "The university chooses me. If you want your diploma, you'd better learn to cooperate." She walked out of the room as though she had already won. The moment the door closed, I reached beneath my pillow and picked up the small digital recorder I had switched on before our conversation began. Every word she and the dean had spoken was safely stored inside it. They believed nobody would ever challenge them. They had no idea I had already started preparing for Monday. Monday arrived beneath a bright blue sky, and the entire campus looked as though it had been transformed overnight. Red carpets stretched from the administration building to the auditorium. Fresh flowers lined the entrance, banners welcomed the visiting officials, and camera crews from several local news stations were already setting up their equipment. Everywhere I looked, staff members wore forced smiles while rushing to make sure everything appeared perfect. The university wanted this event to become another carefully staged success story. Brooke floated around the campus like the guest of honor. Faculty members greeted her warmly, photographers followed her through the hallways, and Dean Harper rarely left her side. Anyone watching from a distance would have believed she was the model student everyone admired. Only I knew how much of that image had been built on lies. I carried my recorder inside my purse as though it were the most valuable thing I owned. In reality, it probably was. Every threat, every arrogant confession, every attempt to intimidate me had been preserved inside that tiny device. Before entering the auditorium, I looked at my reflection in one of the glass doors. I wasn't nervous anymore. The fear Dean Harper had tried so hard to create had disappeared the moment I realized the truth was stronger than his authority. Hundreds of students had already taken their seats when I entered. The front rows were reserved for city officials, local business leaders, donors, and members of the university board. Television cameras pointed toward the stage where I had been scheduled to deliver the welcoming speech. Dean Harper noticed me immediately. He smiled politely, but there was a warning hidden behind his eyes, silently reminding me to behave. Brooke stood only a few feet away wearing an elegant white dress. Her expensive ombre nails glittered beneath the stage lights exactly as she had hoped they would. When our eyes met, she smirked confidently before whispering, "Remember what the dean told you. Don't ruin your own future." I smiled back without saying a word. She mistook my silence for surrender. A few minutes later my name was announced. I walked toward the podium while applause echoed through the auditorium. The mayor, several council members, university trustees, and dozens of invited guests watched attentively. Television cameras followed every step I took. I placed my prepared speech on the podium but never opened it. Instead, I slowly removed the small digital recorder from my purse. For several long seconds nobody understood what I was doing. Then I pressed the play button and held the speaker close to the microphone. Brooke's voice exploded through the auditorium. "Have you lost your mind?" she screamed, followed by fake sobbing that filled every corner of the hall. Moments later her dramatic plea echoed through the speakers. "Please come quickly. Claire is trying to have me arrested." Confused whispers spread through the audience almost instantly. Before anyone recovered, Dean Harper's recorded voice thundered across the room. "Claire, leave Brooke alone. If this continues, forget your leadership position. Forget graduating." His words echoed against the auditorium walls. Every microphone, every television camera, every live stream captured them perfectly. I watched the dean's face drain of color. He shot to his feet, desperately waving toward the sound technicians. "Turn that off," he shouted. "Stop the recording immediately." Nobody moved. They were too shocked to react. Brooke stared at me as though she had forgotten how to breathe. The confident smile she had worn only seconds earlier disappeared completely. I stopped the recording and leaned toward the podium microphone. My voice remained calm. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Claire Bennett, Student Council President. Today I was supposed to speak about integrity, fairness, and the values this university proudly promotes. Unfortunately, I cannot stand here and pretend those values actually exist." Absolute silence filled the room. "For 2 months," I continued, "my roommate repeatedly used my personal property without permission, borrowed hundreds of dollars she never intended to repay, and recently committed fraud by using my prepaid salon membership without my authorization. When I attempted to report the theft, I was threatened by an administrator who warned that my graduation could be delayed if I refused to remain silent." Dean Harper rushed toward the stage. "This is a misunderstanding," he shouted. "She's making false accusations during an official ceremony." Before security could move, the mayor slowly stood from his chair. His expression had become remarkably serious. "Dean Harper," he said firmly, "sit down." The entire auditorium froze. Even the security officers hesitated. The mayor looked directly at me. "Miss Bennett, do you have evidence supporting these statements?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." From my bag I removed a neatly organized folder containing screenshots of payment histories, salon receipts, transaction records, timestamps, copies of messages, and written confirmation from the salon employee who admitted my account had been used without permission. I walked down the stage steps and handed everything directly to the mayor's chief of staff. Brooke suddenly burst into tears and stumbled toward the front. "She's lying," she cried. "She hates me because I'm poor. She's trying to destroy my future." I calmly looked at her hands. "Those beautiful nails you're wearing," I asked quietly, "did you pay for them yourself? Or did you buy them with the money you stole from me?" Every person in the room instinctively looked at her hands. The sparkling manicure had become impossible to ignore. Brooke instinctively hid them behind her back, but it was already too late. The contrast couldn't have been worse. She claimed to be struggling financially while displaying luxury cosmetics purchased through fraud. Dean Harper continued trying to interrupt, but another voice suddenly echoed through the auditorium. "That's enough." University President Collins had just entered through the side entrance after apparently hearing about the live broadcast. His face showed open anger. He walked directly toward the mayor before turning to Dean Harper. "My office," he said coldly. "Immediately. Both of you." Brooke looked completely lost. "But I'm supposed to represent the university today." "You won't be representing anyone," President Collins replied sharply. You'll be appearing before a disciplinary committee. Security officers quietly escorted both Brooke and Dean Harper out of the auditorium while hundreds of students watched in stunned silence. Phones were recording everything. Social media notifications had probably already begun flooding the internet. I returned to the stage, collected my recorder, and stepped away from the microphone. There was nothing else I needed to say. The truth had already spoken for itself. Instead of remaining for the ceremony, I walked straight out of the auditorium and headed toward the city police department. For the first time in weeks, I finally felt completely free. By the time I finished giving my statement at the police station, my phone had become almost impossible to use. Every few seconds another notification appeared. Videos from the ceremony had already spread across social media, and local news outlets were replaying the moment Dean Harper threatened my graduation in front of hundreds of witnesses. The university had wanted a perfect publicity event. Instead, they had created a public relations disaster that everyone in the city was discussing. Officer Ramirez, the detective assigned to my case, carefully examined every document I had brought with me. She reviewed my payment records, screenshots of our messages, copies of the salon receipt, and finally listened to the entire audio recording without interrupting. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked directly at me. Most of what happened with the laundry card and the smaller expenses would normally be handled through civil claims, she explained. But using your prepaid salon account without authorization is another matter. That qualifies as financial fraud. Combined with the evidence you've collected, there's enough for us to move forward. I want to press charges, I answered without hesitation. I don't want mediation. I don't want another meeting with the university. I want the law to handle it. She nodded once. Understood. A warrant was requested before I even left the station. When I returned to campus later that afternoon, the atmosphere had completely changed. Students who had barely spoken to me all semester suddenly stopped their conversations whenever I walked past. Some looked embarrassed. Others smiled awkwardly. Everyone had seen the video. By the time I reached my dormitory floor, whispers followed me down the hallway. I unlocked my room and immediately saw Brooke throwing clothes into a large duffel bag. Drawers had been pulled open, books were scattered across the floor, and suitcases lay half-packed beside her bed. Our other roommate, Emma, sat silently on her mattress staring at her phone with a pale face. Brooke slowly turned toward me. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but the anger burning behind them was impossible to miss. Are you satisfied now? She shouted. You destroyed my life over a few $100s. Your parents have more money than they'll ever need, and you ruined everything because you couldn't let it go. I calmly placed my backpack on my desk before answering. I didn't ruin your life. Your own choices did. You didn't borrow money. You stole it. When I finally refused to let you keep taking advantage of me, you tried to use the administration to threaten my education. Those were your decisions, not mine. She pointed a shaking finger toward me. You have no idea what it's like growing up with nothing. I had to fight for every opportunity I've ever had. Being poor doesn't give anyone permission to steal, I replied quietly. Thousands of scholarship students work 2 jobs, study every night, and still manage to stay honest. You didn't take food because your family was starving. You used my money to buy designer nails so you could impress politicians on television. She let out a furious scream and grabbed one of her textbooks from the shelf. Before I could react, she hurled it across the room. It slammed into my wardrobe, leaving a deep dent in the wooden door. Emma jumped to her feet. Brooke. Stop. Have you completely lost your mind? Brooke turned toward her. Stay out of this. You drank the coffee Claire paid for too. You're just too scared to admit it. Before Emma could answer, 3 heavy knocks echoed through the room. Campus security. Police department. Open the door. Brooke froze instantly. The bag slipped from her hands and landed on the floor. I walked calmly past her and opened the door. 2 police officers stood outside beside the director of student housing. "Brooke Dawson?" one officer asked. She backed away until her legs hit the bed frame. "Please, no. This is all a misunderstanding." Then she looked directly at me, her voice breaking into desperate sobs. "Claire, please tell them not to do this. I'll pay you back. I'll find a job. I'll return every dollar. Please, if I'm arrested, I'll lose my scholarship." I looked at her without anger, but without sympathy either. "You should have considered that before threatening my future." The officers stepped forward. "Brooke Dawson, you are under arrest on suspicion of financial fraud and unauthorized use of another person's account. Please place your hands behind your back." As the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, she finally cried real tears instead of the carefully rehearsed ones she had used so many times before. She was escorted through the hallway while dozens of students watched silently from their open doors. This time nobody applauded her. Nobody called her inspirational. Emma slowly reached for her phone after the officers left. "Claire," she whispered nervously, "I still owe you for those coffees last semester. I'll send the money tonight." I nodded once. "Thank you." During the following 2 weeks, everything collapsed with astonishing speed. The university board launched an internal investigation after the mayor publicly criticized the administration. Auditors soon uncovered something far more serious than my complaint. Dean Harper had been misusing scholarship funds intended for disadvantaged students. Large portions of the budget had quietly disappeared into luxury conferences, administrative retreats, and personal expenses. Brooke had become the perfect public symbol to distract donors and officials from the financial irregularities. Protecting her image had become more important to him than protecting honest students. Once investigators connected the dots, Dean Harper was immediately dismissed. His pension was suspended while state authorities opened a formal investigation into possible embezzlement. Brooke's disciplinary hearing ended only a few days later. She was expelled from the university. Although her lawyer managed to reduce the criminal charges because she had no previous record, she still received heavy fines, community service, and a permanent criminal conviction that would follow her for years. She eventually returned to her hometown with the future she had imagined completely destroyed, not because someone betrayed her, but because she believed taking advantage of others had no consequences. As for me, President Collins personally apologized for everything that had happened. The university offered me a private suite for the remainder of the academic year and assured me that every threat against my graduation had been erased from my record. Whether the offer came from genuine regret or fear of a lawsuit no longer mattered. I accepted it and focused on finishing my final semester in peace. Graduation day finally arrived beneath clear skies. Families filled the campus lawns while graduates adjusted their gowns and took photographs with friends. This time there were no threats, no manipulation, and no fake tears. As I waited for my name to be called, my phone vibrated with a payment notification. Emma had transferred the money she owed me for those coffees, along with a short message that simply read, "Thank you for teaching me that kindness should never be taken for granted." I smiled, accepted the payment, and locked my phone. A few moments later I crossed the stage, shook President Collins' hand, and accepted my diploma. Looking out across the audience, I realized something important. People often mistake kindness for weakness because they assume generous people will never defend themselves. They couldn't be more wrong. Kindness is a choice, not an obligation, and the moment someone treats it like permission to exploit you, it stops being kindness altogether. I walked off the stage carrying far more than a diploma. I carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had refused to sacrifice my dignity simply to protect people who had never respected it in the first place.